particularly pleased to announce our next speaker, Emmanuelle Assouan. And I'm looking forward to her presentation on the question, nature-related risks, status quo. Mrs. Assouan comes from the Banque of France, Banque de France. Banque de France is a very important and active member in the network for greening the financial system of the central banks. In this network, Banque de France plays a preeminent role. Not only they're dealing with climate risks, but they're also looking into possibilities of biodiversity risks. And in that respect, it's particularly interesting to see that Mrs. Assouan, Director General for Financial Stability and Operations since January 2023, before she had a career in the bank and went through all stations, almost all stations, from implementation, monetary policy, and more particularly financial stability, but also financing of infrastructure. She started working at the bank in 1997, and she's a graduate of the Institut d'études politiques in Paris. So I'm particularly pleased to hear your perspective. And as I said, you are currently Deputy Secretary General of Banque de France, and we're looking forward to your presentation on the biodiversity crisis as the status quo. Mrs. Assouan, you have the floor.
Many thanks for the warm welcome. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very delighted to be here today. Well, a little bit remote in Paris, but to attend the Green Financial Conference of the DACHLILU environmental agencies. So I will deliver a little bit of a speech over the coming minutes. And but first of all, I would like to echo the great insights that we just heard and state clearly that central banks, supervisors, and other financial actors should, without a doubt, remain committed to climate action. But if I'm here today, as it was just mentioned, it is to make the case that climate change is not the only planetary boundary we're collectively pressing against, as we face the growing evidence and also the growing recognition of the materiality of nature-related financial risks. I will develop first why nature-related risks and biodiversity loss matter for financial actors. And second, what should be done from the perspective of a central banker and a financial supervisor. So first, why biodiversity loss and nature-related financial risks matter for financial actors. The rationale underlying climate action taken by central bankers and supervisors extends far beyond climate change. Nature degradation, or more precisely, the decline in nature's ability to provide us with ecosystem services, be it services like the provision of fresh water, raw materials, regulation services like pollination, flood control, or carbon sequestration, can cause large-scale disruption in economic activities and potentially constitute a significant threat to financial stability. So here on the slide, you have the chart trying to encapsulate the different, the chain of risk related to nature and biodiversity loss. To illustrate the importance of nature for our economy, a recent study estimated that $44 trillion of economy value generation, which means more than half of the global GDP, is moderately or highly dependent on ecosystem services. Needless to say that if our economy is so dependent on nature, our financial system, which is intimately dependent on our economy, is also in fact very dependent on nature. Just like climate change, natural loss can translate into physical or transition risks for financial actors. So physical risks for first, which are the various hazards and shocks caused by the degradation of nature, can negatively impact business operations, affecting profitability and the ability to repay lenders. This results, among other things, in market and credit risks for financial institutions. Similarly, on the side of transition risks, which are the risks relating to changes in policy, technology, or consumer preferences towards more nature-positive practices, those transition risks can also affect business operations and profitability, particularly for companies with an excessively negative impact on nature. These risks can threaten individual financial institutions and potentially aggregate into systemic financial risks. What's more, physical and transition risks and transition sources of risk could reinforce each other with potential feedback loops to the real economy. So let me illustrate those 2 points with one example: deforestation. Countries that are dependent on the production or export of goods responsible for deforestation may see their fiscal income or balance of payments or both negatively affected by transition aiming at reversing nature loss. It could also have significant impacts on importing countries, inasmuch as it could increase the price of commodities and threaten price stability. The example of deforestation also goes to show that tackling climate without addressing broader nature-related issues is a dead end. Climate change is indeed a major driver of nature loss, and activities such as deforestation contribute to both threats, while healthy forest ecosystems provide resilience to growing climate shocks through carbon sequestration. So this type of picture diagnosis should be reason enough for financial actors to act upon nature-related risks at the same time that they act upon climate-related risks. And here I'm going to slide 3. They are, however, those financial actors currently faced with important challenges whenever nature is concerned. Challenges which are mainly linked to our understanding or poor understanding of nature. In that respect, standard economic models of production assume substitutability between labor, capital, and land nature. On the contrary, in reality, the ecosystem services that underpin all economic production are deemed, for the greater part, not substitutable. In addition, the complexity of ecosystems and the variety of ecosystem services make it difficult to aggregate the different dimensions of nature under one single common variable of interest or unit of measurement, such as for climate change with the CO2 equivalent. The financial industry has to act in the face of those challenges. It needs to get familiar with the topic of nature, develop its insight on the potential shocks that could be detrimental for financial stability, both for physical and transition risk. It then needs to go beyond qualitative assessment and find the relevant data to work with, data that will be reliant on hard facts. And then it needs to use appropriate, consistent tools and metrics to process those data. So what is to be done and can be done to address nature-related challenges? So it may seem a little bit like a rather daunting task, but the good news, and we have good news, is that among financial actors, as we speak, ambitious initiatives have been or are being if not yet, will be implemented. So here I'm on my slide 4. So one of those initiatives to start with, it's one that seeks to bolster coordination between central banks and supervisors. It was previously mentioned, but we have the NGFS task force, the Network for Greening the Financial System task force on biodiversity loss and nature-related risks. And I have the honor of co-chairing alongside Saskia de Vries from the Dutch Central Bank this task force on biodiversity loss and nature-related risks. So the task force is meant to act as an incubator on nature-related issues, explore the different interconnections and differences between nature and climate-related risks, and leverage the work already done on the subject within the NGFS and beyond, with Inspire, for instance. Since agreeing on a common language and reaching a common fundamental understanding of the root cause issues is key to enable collaboration and develop our toolbox, one of the future deliverables of the task force include a conceptual framework aimed at fostering a shared approach to identifying, assessing, and addressing nature-related financial risks among central bankers and supervisors. It is more than a conceptual framework, it is also an operational handbook in order to help central bankers and supervisors to address step by step on a stepwise approach what they should do in order to address those nature-related financial risks. The task force also seeks to address the potential implications of nature-related risks for the financial system. Obviously, it's the NGFS. Members of the task force are currently developing nature-related scenarios that would be as consistent as possible with the NGFS climate scenarios while capturing the implications of broader nature losses. Their work on nature-related scenarios will be key to help central bankers and supervisors in order to set up stress testing to develop a forward-looking approach on the risks that we face. All in all, we should help also mainstreaming nature-related considerations in the regular work of the NGFS, so monetary policy, financial stability, investment policy for the central banks. Disclosures stand as another top priority for cooperation among the financial authorities community. Holding financial actors accountable on their dependencies and impacts on nature, and thus having them to provide more, better, but also more granular data forms part of the backbone of the nature-related actions. It is one of the key targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework that was agreed upon at the COP15 last December. It is also the focus of business-oriented initiatives like the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures that aims at providing companies and financial institutions with the proper tools to assess those dependencies and impacts and communicate about them. Such disclosures are also bound to be more and more common with the abolition of the international accounting standards. The French Energy and Climate Act, what we call Loi Énergie-Climat of 2019, which stands as a pioneer, makes it mandatory in France for some financial institutions to disclose information on their biodiversity and climate-related impacts and dependencies, and to publish a long-term alignment strategy on biodiversity-related objectives. Progress is also being made at the European level, as the SFDR regulation already defines a principal adverse impact indicator on biodiversity. In the context of the upcoming CSRD, the EU should also adopt a new biodiversity-related standard, ESRS E4, developed by EFRAG. The international level, International Sustainability Standards Board, ESSB, is working on sustainability disclosure standards as well, that will, in the short term, include biodiversity-related norms. That will hopefully spur voluntary action in that direction from financial actors, even before jurisdictions adopt this standard. And this should help ensuring interoperability and consistency across jurisdictions at the global level. But what we also need with regards to disclosures, just like it was thought through for climate, is a strong supervisory action motivated by a strong regulatory background. We are trying to make that happen in France. The SCPR, the supervisory arm of Banque de France for banks and insurers, is currently conducting and planning several initiatives related to the implementation by banks and insurers of biodiversity requirements according to the French legislation. But more should come. In the future, the regulation could foster an increase, both in depth and in width, in supervisory expectations related to nature, just like we did at the ECB level for climate. It is likely that current trends could, in time, develop along the same milestones that we had for climate, such as regular nature-related stress testing at the EU level. But central banks can lead by example, and it's very important to continue to do so, using a very stepwise assessment of dependencies and impacts on nature via their sustainable and responsible investment policy. Banque de France has started reporting on the sustainable management of own funds and pension liabilities. It's like 22 billion euros. Its investment portfolios are quite important. We have started to report back in 2018. We added a nature-related dimension to this assessment in 2022 through a biodiversity impact score and an indicator of exposure to companies involved in the production of chemical products harmful to biodiversity. Last step, in 2022, we partnered with a data provider to carry out a detailed assessment of impact on biodiversity of the equity and corporate bond components of our portfolios, the one doing like 22 billion euros. There is still room for improvement, but we are confident that in the years ahead, we will keep on improving and building on the collective efforts to find the relevant tools and metrics. I'm going to step to slide 2 and maybe conclude on the need to mobilize mainstream finance towards nature-positive investments. Investing in nature is instrumental in avoiding risks, but it is not just a risk issue. That's the way we take it from the NGFS perspective and the central bank perspective, but at the larger extent, it is not only a risk issue. Actively working towards bending the curve of nature loss could also lead to very positive economic outcomes. The estimated financing gap to reverse the decline in biodiversity has been estimated by the Paulson Institute to stand between $600 billion and $824 billion per year until 2030. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework comprises among its objectives the target to mobilize by 2030 at least $200 billion per year in domestic and international biodiversity-related funding from all sources, private and public. To give us an idea of where we stand against these needs and goals, The world currently spends more between like 120 billion US dollar and 140 billion US dollar on nature conservation. This means that investments need to be substantially scaled up to bridge the financing gap for nature. So if we come back to deforestation-related issues as an example, the benefit is very critical and very material for growth. The Inter-American Development Bank has estimated that policies to prevent the Amazon dieback would generate approximately 340 billion US dollars in additional wealth. In that light, we cannot afford to remain complacent to nature-related losses and let nature issues in a blind spot. So action is very strongly deserved, and central banks and supervisors are very key and willing to contribute on that front. So I will stop here, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.